Hey guys, Jamie here, and today we're going to be showing you how to rig up a 3D model in Blender. Now, today's video is actually geared toward Pokemon, partly because I work for Pixelmon, which is a mod for Minecraft that it essentially adds in Pokemon to the game, and I'm one of the animators. So this is probably going to be watched predominantly by Pixelmon people, so if you are a Pixelmon people, hello. If you're not, this should also apply to you. So hopefully this will help you out. So today what we're going to do is what's called the rig. Now I'm going to split this into two videos. The first part is going to be how to make the skeleton. Then the second part is how to weight paint. The skeleton is basically putting in the bones. It's pretty simple. The second part, weight painting, is assigning each vertex to a bone. Now what this means is if I go into edit mode on the model, every model is composed of essentially corners, which are called vertices, and edges and faces. So this is currently on vertex select mode, so you can see the vertexes as little black blobs, or the vertices are little black blobs, which are the corners. The faces are pretty self-explanatory, the solid bits, and the edges are the lines that are connecting each point. So first off, the rig. And then once we've got the bones, when we move the bones around, we want parts of the model to go with that. So we've got to assign different parts of the model to each bone. So to start off, what we're going to do is we're going to add 2 root bones. And I'll explain why you want this. But first, press Shift S and do cursor to selected. Sorry, I do apologize. Cursor to center. This will ensure your cursor, your 3D cursor, which will place your bone, is slap bang in the middle, just like this model. Now we're going to create the first root. To do that, you need to make sure you're in object mode. If you're not familiar with Blender, there's essentially edit modes and object modes. Object mode allows you to scroll between any of your objects. So right here, if you look where my mouse is, top right, you'll see there's the camera, the Elekid model, and the lamp. And then once you select something, so if I select this, which is the lamp, then I'll be able to press tab and... this doesn't have any other modes at the moment because it's a lamp. But if I go to this, I can press tab and I can go to mesh mode. And when we create the skeleton, there'll be a skeleton we can click on to go into the edits of the skeleton. So first off, object mode, we're going to go along to here on the bar. If this bar isn't showing up, on your 3D view there'll be a plus on the left, and you just want to come down to create, and then you want to choose armature. Now we're going to call this bone root. This will allow us to move the entire model completely, really easily with just one bone. Now I've just pressed full stop on my number pad, or the del key on my number pad, to zoom in on this point, and I'm just going to go over to what is over here, which is the properties panel on the right hand side, which is where it usually is in the default view. And I'm going to click this, what looks like a man. I'm going to rename this skeleton. So I'm having trouble with spelling because I'm terrible at spelling. Thankfully I no longer do any languages. Then display, you want to choose X-ray, and now you'll be able to see the bones through the mesh. So I'm just going to center my view again by pressing 1 on my number pad and full stop on my number pad or del key. And we should be set up now. That skeleton, it's entered a skeleton, and we've got our root. So first I'm going to scale this down. I'm going to grab the bone, and you can see in object mode I can choose between what objects I've selected, like I was saying. Now if I press tab here, it will choose me, or change me into the edit mode, and this now gives me all the options I can change between on the bone, the armature. So I've got pose mode, edit mode, and object mode is the global mode. Pose mode is how you pose the bones, but that's after the weight painting. So I'm just going to press G now, and G is the shortcut for grab or move, and then I'm going to press Z on my keyboard so that I only move in the Z axis. So I can just scale it down like this. Now I'm going to press E for extrude and Z again, and just have another one up the top. I'm going to call this one body root. or root body actually. This will allow me to do something called inverse kinematics, and not have the bones that are being tracked involved in any rotation or global thing I'm putting on the body, because if I don't have this, then I would effectively need to correct, which just makes things more difficult. Now I'm going to press tab, go back to object mode, and then select the mesh. I'm going to press tab again, and I'm going to be chosen over to mesh mode. Now I'm going to put my upper body and lower body seam slap bang along this line here, this line. So I can press Alt on my keyboard and right click, and it should, oh, I need to press Shift as well. It should go partially around the side. Sometimes this doesn't work because you've got interruptions like this few vertices here. Another option I could do is I could just orbit around by pressing in my scroll wheel and press Shift and right click to select the vertices. And the final option is I could press B on my keyboard and draw a little box around the vertices I want. The final method is what I use probably the most. It's best if you go press 1 on your number pad, then 5 to get this view. Press Z then to show the wireframe, and you can grab and you can orbit around to make sure you've got it. And you will now notice I have an entire orange line all the way around my model, which means I've got it. So I'm going to press Shift S and do cursor to selected, which will put my cursor in the mean of all these points. If you don't know what a mean is, the mean is the most common type of average that's used. Basically, you add up everything and divide by the amount of things you have. So, yeah, that's commonly known as the average, but there is other types of average. So we've got to keep careful. Now, if I press tab again, and then we're in object mode, then select the skeleton, press tab again, and now we're in skeleton mode. Then we'll press E and Z, and once again, just pull up a bone. Now, this time, I don't want it stemming from here. I want it stemming from where I just put my cursor. So I'm going to disconnect it in these bone settings here on the properties window. And I'm going to change this to upper body. Now I'm going to press G and Z and just make sure it will rip off. That's good. Now I want this to be slap bang on that cursor, which is why I put the cursor there. So I can press Shift S and selection to cursor. And that will move the selected point, which is that root part of the bone, to exactly there. I'm going to do the same with the top of the bone. And just like this, I can press 1 and 5 on my number pad and Z to get into this view, or a combination of those to get into this view, and instantly I've managed to select all those. That is because I'm in wireframe. I'll be able to select through the mesh. If you instead are not on wireframe, you won't be able to select through the mesh. As you can see, that hasn't selected stuff out the back. But if you want to, you can turn on this thing here, which I'm just circling now. And what this does is it allows you to see the wireframe through the other half of the model, and effectively it will let you box select through the other side, or through the mesh. But I don't want that on right now. So there we go. Shift S, cursor to selected, and then Shift S, selection to cursor. Just make it sure it's right where I want it. Now I'll do the ears. Okay, so maybe wireframe here, that might be an easier view. Press full stop or delete key on my number pad and I can see that a bit easier. Shift S, selection to cursor, no, cursor to selected. Go back, tab, choose the skeleton, go back to skeleton, and press tab again to go to skeleton edit mode. E, Z to extrude in the Z direction only, and then I'm going to disconnect this. I'm going to call it the right ear 1. Because it's the first bone in the right ear. And I can press GX and move it along in the X-axis nearby where I want it. And I'm going to select this piece and do Shift S, selection to cursor. And now my bone is almost in the right place. And so I'm going to go back into my wireframe, back through my tabbing and selecting of the model to select these 4 vertices. Excuse me, I'm about to sneeze. Sorry about that. Oh, I just got tickling my nose. Shift S. And then I'll go cursor to selected, and then choose this, and then do selection to cursor. Okay, and then just the same out top. Here we go. So you're probably already noticing that rigging is pretty boring. and I will give you that. Yes, it is very boring. Unfortunately, it's a really necessary process. There's no way around it. So you're going to have to just deal with it. And it's good to rig your own models, or rig whatever you're animating yourself. Because if you have a vision for an animation, if someone else rigs it for you, then yeah, that's a selection to cursor. If someone else rigs it for you, then they may not add bones and allow you to move things you wanted to move. So that's a bit of a pain if you don't rig what you want. And of course, you can't always rely on the skill of the work. So I'm going to go into this. I think I've still got that mode on. Yes. So this basically goes between 2D and 3D mode. This 5 on your number pad. It does have a complicated name, but I can't ever remember it. So the arms are a bit funky here because they were made as separate meshes. This is mainly because this is to be going into a game, and so the users who played the game usually have pretty terrible computers, and hence you need a simple model. But it's easier, it gives you less geometry if you just clip the meshes together. I particularly dislike it. I do complain about it a lot, but that's that. I actually had to do some doctoring to this model to make these sticks of the arm stick further in. Anyway, Shift S, cursor to selected, and then we'll go back to this, and we'll extrude another bone. This doesn't really need to be along the axis because it's so far away. I'm just going to disconnect it and move it along, and I'm going to call this a right arm 1. Now up top here, I forgot to rename that right ear 2, and you'll see it put a .001 on the end. That's the usual Blender way of adding numbers, or adding the next bone. So I'm going to select the tip of the head of this bone here, Shift S, and then selection to cursor because my cursor's left there, and then just select this, maybe with an Alt Shift, and I can select that whole ring at the same time, and then cursor to selected. So what you'll notice as you get used to Blender and you use it more, there's a lot of shortcuts to do the same thing essentially. So I've shown you the box, the manual, the Alt Shift method like that. There's also other methods that include faces, depending on if there's faces between there. But in general, you can use what you want. I use a mix of all of them on the fly. So I'm just going to use cursor to selected. That option always makes me think, unless I'm listening to some really snazzy music and very concentrated. Selection to cursor. That's it. Many a time do I get that wrong. Now for my animation purposes, I think I'll keep this big section of the body still. Big section of the arm still. So I'm going to add one more bone along here, and then a final tip bone just to go to the end. So I'm going to do my Alt Shift trick. Shift S. Selection to cursor to selected even. See, I almost click that. And then I'm just going to do selection to cursor. Right. And then I'm going to rename this right arm 3. I'm going to rename this right arm 2. And then we're almost done with the upper body, because I'm actually able to flip something from one end to the other, or one side of the body to the other. Another method of moving to a bone I mentioned was face. You can use this button down here to select face, and if you move back to vertices select, you'll see that all the vertices in that face have now been selected, and Shift S as usual, cursor to selected, and then extrude a final bone. Oh no, I'm selected up that tip there. Let me just pop this out, because I think I made a body. Right ear, I want right arm. Right arm 100. That bone is what I just made by accident when I pressed E. Select, delete. There we go. I accidentally left my cursor up there and extruded. So I'm just going to do that. Shift S, selection to cursor. And then we'll rename this. Now we've done half the body. I'm going to tell you about something else that needs to be done. So if we go back to bone edit mode with a combination of your tabbing and clicking, but just then, by the way, I put in the shift and clicked in my mouse wheel, and then I can move my mouse around and move around. Just clicking in the wheel and moving will rotate you. So if you notice on this panel here, or if the panel isn't there, you can just pop it out with this plus button. You'll see there's a radius, roll, and envelope. Roll basically is the spin there. Envelope and radius have got things to do about weight painting. They're features I have never used because I stay on this sort of more straight and narrow path. What I love most about Blender is that you can use it for ages, be amazingly skilled in one area, but have never heard of a whole other section of Blender that people use Blender for, and you can be a complete newbie for it. So I find that really cool. Anyway, we're going to put those all to 0. This roll, if that's not on 0, what will happen is when you flip the skeleton to the other side, if you want to try to flip, and if the roll's different on both sides, and if you try to flip a pose from one side to another, it will not work. But more on that later. I can actually do an example in the video I do on how to animate this, because we'll actually take this all the way to the animation stage, and I may do one entire cycle on it. So what that would be is me animating its idle cycle, so what it does in the game when it's stood still, which gives you an idea of how to make an animation loop. So selection to cursor, and now we're going to call this lower body. There we go. So as you notice, these are in different directions. That means that these two are not parented, which theoretically means I could rip the body, or I could stretch the body up. Anyway, now we're going to do the right leg. So I'm going to go over, and I'm going to, this has also got the funky thing going on. Oh, I want to change back to my vertex select. The funky thing going on with the vertices and side, with the two meshes sort of merged. Oh, there we go. I'm just going to press full stop or the delete key on my number pad to focus, and then press Z to come out of wireframe mode. So I could see that a bit better, but that doesn't see in wireframe. You sometimes can be quite difficult. I'm going to trace the line here, so that line goes all the way to that vertice, and then that vertice, and I think it's this one. Yeah, there you go, because there's a lot of vertices all around each other in wireframe. Right, so that's that piece selected. Shift S, selection to cursor to selected even. Almost made the mistake yet again. And then go back to your bone edit mode, choose the tip of this bone of the lower body. We're going to extrude it, we're going to disconnect it, we're going to call it right leg 1. Leg 1. And we're going to grab it and rip it off. Remember to grab with the G shortcut, and if you want to specify an axis, you can just hit that key. So we're going to shift S and then selection to cursor, and we do tab, click on the model, and then tab again, and then get these bits, because there's going to be a bend in this bit. That's sort of the knee. Unfortunately, Pokemon aren't well, they're not consistent in their anatomy in any way, shape or form. So we're going to go with selection to cursor. Oh no, press Ctrl Z to get rid of that. Shift S, selection cursor selected. I don't know why that menu always gets me. Really, really odd. Now I'm going to go down to maybe about here. Make this quite a long bone, so that the IK is easier. Or IK is short for inverse kinematics, which I think I mentioned at the start. I'm just going to try to get this so the mean is somewhere along this path line that's parallel to this edge here. And I think I've done a good job by selecting all but these front two vertices here. So Shift S, cursor selected, which will, there we go, E, we'll just do Z, selection to cursor, and then that's right leg 2. So already, after only a short amount of time, you can see this has come together quite well. And then Shift S, cursor to selected, and then 2 more bones. selection cursor, and then just a toe joint. The reason I add toe joints is that in a walk cycle I can then cursor to selected, I can then get it to push off with its toes, which is nice. It looks a lot less artificial in that way. So now we're going to grab these and make sure these are all correct. I'm going to call this left foot, right foot even. Oh, and I had my caps lock on. Foot. Damn, do I hate the caps lock? And then I'm going to call this right foot. Oh no, that should be right toes. Okay, and you can see that this isn't straight. That's because I've put it directly on the vertices. Vertice means, and that's not 100% straight. Possibly that's not a brilliant thing in this case, but it's not going to be a big issue at all. Sometimes it could be an issue. Now I'm just going to make sure all my rolls, radiuses and envelopes are on 0, because I only really need the roll on 0, but I'm very OCD about having those values on 0. I have no idea why. I don't even want to get close to them. Alright, there we go. I think I've got all the upper body. Let me just check. No, that one isn't. Envelope on 0. And yep, they're all on 0. So now you will notice we've got half a skeleton, and I'm feeling pretty happy that I've put in all the bones. So you may be wondering, what about the other half? Yes, the other half indeed. What we're going to do is we're going to flip it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to object mode. We're going to press. We're going to select on the bones at first, or the skeleton. Do Control C and then Control V, and you'll see we've got this dark orange. This is because there is this new skeleton. So in this overall thing, you'll see there's skeleton and skeleton.001. And now we've got this, so I can go into the edit mode of skeleton or skeleton.001, which is interesting. So I'm going to go into skeleton.001. I'm going to change the scale. This is in object mode. This is not in edit mode. I'm going to change the X scale to -1. This is because this red line is the X. In Blender, red lines are X, green lines are Z, Y, and blue lines are Z. So I want what is a positive X over here, or well, this is actually looks more like a negative X right here. I want that to be the same magnitude, but the other sign on the other side. So if it's -4, I want it to be +4. So I put in -1 for X. So -4 goes to -4 or 4. That's just a bit of maths for you there. It does make sense if you think about it. I promise you. Anyway, I'm going to delete these second bones, because otherwise we'll have 2 copies of the upper lower body and both roots, and we only want 1 copy of each of those. So I'm going to delete those. And now I've got one of every bone I want, except for these 2 are not joined. You'll notice I can't now select these, and they've not got their black outlines. But first off, I'm going to change them to left, because this is the left variant now, which you just copied. I think I've spelled left there right. And the T can stay. The F, T. So I'm a reasonable distance away from my monitor right now, so fine text isn't exactly the easiest thing to read. And then left toes. And the reason I want to do this is so that, because when I merge these 2 skeletons into one skeleton, if I don't do this, one side will randomly be assigned right arm .001 or right arm 2.001, etc. And so I want to make sure their left and right is correct. There we go, and brilliant. Now I'm going to go to this mode, and what I essentially want to do is I want to select this, and I want to select this. And what you'll notice straight away is it's really difficult to do in the 3D view because the mesh gets in the way. So what I can do is I can just go here on this view, which is called the overview, I think. I can't see its image here. Why don't we change it to 3D view and try and change it back? Oh, it's called outliner. I wasn't going down enough. Outliner overview is similar. And if I click this, skeleton.001, then hold shift and click this, you'll see they're both selected, and the first selection is dark orange and the second is light orange. I press Control J with my mouse in the 3D view, and they've now merged all into one. And you'll see I've only got skeleton along here. And if I press G, the whole skeleton will move. Press Ctrl Z to get back, and I haven't screwed anything up. So now you'll notice the parenting little sort of fish lines don't exist anymore. That's because what these bones here on the left, or what is to your perspective, your and my perspective is right, but the model's perspective left, these were copied and what they were parented to deleted. So we now need to parent it to these bones here. So if I check this one, this is over here, tells me it's parented to the lower body. That's because I extruded it from there. And now, so I want to set this to lower body. So it'll be alphabetically lower body. And now I've got the little fish line or dotted line or whatever you call it. This is the upper body. So we'll get that to the upper body, which will be at the bottom. And the ear will be upper body as well. The relative relationships will stay. So that's all that. And now we've got to make sure we've got the roll, radius and envelopes on 0 for all the left hand side, because when I've merged them they've adjusted. So I want to change these rolls all to 0, and the radius and envelope will stay on 0 when you merge the skeletons. Okay, and I think that's done there. So that is the whole skeleton. Next job is to do the weight painting, which is assigning what parts of the model follow what bone. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this, and we'll finish up here. So thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.